This special session has been organised by UNFPA and UNICEF, and it is my honour to hand over proceedings to Ms. Kieran Bhatia, the Gender Advisor of the UNFPA Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, who will moderate this session.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you this afternoon. As mentioned, I work with UNFPA as the Regional Advisor, and I have the privilege of moderating this very exciting session with a very diverse group of speakers who are with us this afternoon. Before we commence with introduction of our speakers and a little more about the topic we will be discussing, it gives me great pleasure to invite Nobuko Horibe, our Regional Advisor for UNFPA's Asia Pacific Regional Office, to give a few opening remarks. Nobuko, please.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of UNFPA and UNICEF regional offices, it is my privilege to welcome you all to this session on the role of CRVS in preventing child marriage. Just last week in this same conference center, about 800 people from the government, civil society, and parliamentarians gathered to review the Beijing Platform for Action after almost 20 years of implementation in the region. Issues such as gender-based violence and harmful practices drew a lot of attention as statistics revealed an alarming prevalence across the countries in the region, and among them is child marriage. About half of the global child marriage occurs in this region, especially in South Asia. In spite of the legal age of marriage at 18 in most countries, the practice of child marriage has not reduced much over the past decade. Roughly 2 out of 3 young women in Bangladesh and 1 out of 2 young women in Nepal and India married before the age of 18. Even in East Asia and the Pacific, 1 out of 5 young women married before the age of 18. Child marriage, as you well know, denies the right of girls to education and childhood, and denies their reproductive right to freely choose and when and who to marry, and when and how many children to have. They risk their lives to become pregnant and deliver a child when they themselves are a child. They are more likely to experience violence at home from their husbands who are much older than them. Birth registration enables us to protect and uphold the rights of these girls by having their birth registered and help prevent them from becoming brides in childhood. The Program of Action of International Conference on Population and Development, adopted in Cairo in 1994, recognized that gaps in vital statistics hamper the pursuit of human development goals. Indeed, it has been recognized that child marriage undermines progress in many of the Millennium Development Goals, including reducing poverty, achieving universal education, promoting gender equality and empowerment of women, reducing child mortality, and improving maternal health. Moving forward, it is indeed significant that the open working groups for the post-2015 development agenda determined that elimination of all harmful practices, such as child, early, and forced marriage, should be a target under Sustainable Development Goal 5 on gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls. When we talk about equitable, inclusive, sustainable human development, everyone has to be counted, so everyone can benefit from the development, protection, and basic social services. In Asia, there are many missing girls before and after birth. Some are never born, some born and die, some born alive but not registered, thus not recognized. Their marriages won't be registered, and many of them end up in early marriages that go unregistered. Birth registration must be strengthened to support the improved accountability of national systems to monitor child marriage. Millions of births go unregistered, making it difficult for girls later to ascertain their actual age, what their actual age is, and thus claim protection under the law. This session is an opportunity to share experiences and good practices with those who have the power and authority to implement the necessary actions to strengthen CRVS and use it to prevent child marriages in our respective countries. I am pleased that we have with us a distinguished and diverse panel from South and Southeast Asia. They will demonstrate what legislative infrastructure can be set in place, what existing systems operate to prevent child marriages at the regional and community levels, and the role of civil society and faith-based organizations in preventing child marriage through birth registration. Ladies and gentlemen, child marriage is globally recognized as a gross violation of rights of the girl child and a form of gender-based violence. Therefore, it is particularly relevant that this session is being held today, 25th of November, as today is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. I thank you for your attention and wish to reiterate my gratitude to our partner UNICEF and to our participant for this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nabucco, for an excellent speech. As Nabucco mentioned, child marriage today is recognized globally from the community level amongst many groups who are fighting for girls' rights to the highest global international frameworks and positions by lead organizations on the fact that it is a gross human rights violation and is today globally recognized as a form of violence against women and girls. I'd like to reiterate what Nabucco said as she closed, that today is a very special day. It is the 25th of November, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the 16 days that is now globally recognized as a day, a series of days when we honor, act individually, collectively, to highlight the number of violations that take place in today's world against women and girls. Since we are speaking about child marriage, and today is the 25th, before we begin our discussion, I would like you to spend 1 minute with us to observe a film by the Unite campaign on violence against women and girls. The film, please. For some of you, this must be unusual to reflect on the broad issue of violence against women when you've been deeply engrossed since yesterday on issues of data and statistics and civil registration. I recall when I was a child, my grandfather taught me what civil registration was. He was a doctor, and he was required for a verification of a death. And I asked him, where you're going? And he said, you know, there are 3 times in life when families come together and when milestones are documented. And because you're a child, an easy way to remember it's hatch, batch, and dispatch. And I've never forgotten that. And I think that's what we're discussing here. We're looking at birth, which is hatch, and marriage, and dispatch, which is death. And I think you all have now evolved amazing systems of documentation. I was listening to the last session. But when it comes to child marriage, there are many complicated aspects of civil registration that are a real challenge for communities, a challenge for governments, a challenge for those progressive religious leaders who are trying to work with communities to bring harmony with national laws and with customary laws and procedures. It's most of all a challenge for young girls who have no idea about their rights and what a huge difference a birth registration can make in her fulfillment of her future rights, a right to employment, a right to refuse an early marriage, a right to fight for her rights to property, and a right to establish her identity when required. Many of these factors don't figure in the large numbers and data sets that we deal with. But this afternoon, we have an amazing range of people who are going to help us reflect on these very many diverse aspects of child marriage coming from different countries in our region. And I hope that the discussion that follows will allow all of us to step back, to step out of our boxes, and to reflect a little on the multifarious dimensions that we need to take into account if we really do want to end child marriage in our region. As we've seen from the statistics, our region is a spot on the global map, especially South Asia, where we have very high prevalence of child marriage. And despite existence of revision of laws, improved policies, huge support by donors, a lot of advocacy initiatives by parliamentarians, youth activists, we are still struggling in some countries with rising numbers and no change in the reality. So let's spend a little time with our colleagues here to try and understand various dimensions of why this is the case. And it now gives me great pleasure to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. On my immediate left is our youngest participant, Saraswati Shrestha, who comes from Kavre Palangchok district in Nepal. Saraswati has worked as a child program producer, is a peer educator on health issues, and has worked on young adolescents' rights through a local NGO. She also conducts local governance research where she lives. Saraswati. Next to, at the extreme end, we have Ms. Alisa Wahid, who is a social activist, and I'm sure many of you know her from the amazing work that she has done in Indonesia. She's the vice chairman of the Jogja chapter of the family welfare agency, Nadatul Ulama, which is very well known. It's one of the largest Muslim networks in the world, and she will tell us later how many millions of membership it has. And they focus on family planning, reproductive health, strengthening family life, and basically building capacity of Muslim clerics on cross-regional, cross-religious, cross-cultural, and cross-ethical dialogues. She has managed a vast network of thousands of independent activists, and as some of you may know, is now inherited the management of the Gustur program in Indonesia. Thank you very much, Alisa, for being with us this afternoon. I'd like to welcome Dr. Chandramouli, who is third from my left. Dr. Chandramouli needs no introduction to this audience, and we're really honored that he found the time to join us this afternoon as a Registrar General and Census Commissioner in the Office of the Registrar General in India. He is also the Vice Chair of the Regional Steering Group for the Regional Initiative to Improve CRVS in our region. I think we could have a long account of the many distinguished roles Dr. Chandramouli has played, both at the state and central government levels in India, but also across the region, helping many of our countries. Thank you very much for being with us today. On my left, before Dr. Chandramouli, is Dr. Rinchin Chopal. He is the Director General of a very dynamic, vibrant, new apex body of SAARC called SIVAC, a difficult acronym, important for you to remember. It stands for the South Asia Initiative to End Violence Against Children. And Dr. Rinchin has been the founder member and also the principal architect of this very dynamic South Asian network. Before that, he was the executive director of the National Commission for Women and Children in the Royal Government of Bhutan, and has championed the promotion and protection of the rights of women and children with distinction, not only in his own country, but across many of our countries in South Asia. Thank you very much, Dr. Rinchin, for being with us. And finally, we have with us a very interesting gentleman who's come all the way from Sylhet district in Bangladesh, Mr. Abdul Hasim Bhuyan, who is a lawyer But more interestingly, he is the district Muslim marriage registrar of the Samiti in Sylhet district. And he has actually handling every day a number of marriage certificates, which is a compulsory requirement in his community, and has been leading a program of advocacy to end child marriage. So, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, we have community presence all the way to regional high-level policy dynamics. And with that introduction, I'd also like to thank our 2 interpreters for Nepal and Bangladesh, who very kindly offered to help us do instant interpretation. What we hope to do this afternoon is have 2 rounds of questions, which I will pose to our speakers, and then we will, of course, have time for a discussion following that. I request all our speakers to please take maximum 3 to 4 minutes to answer so that we have time for more discussion thereafter. So may I start with you, Saraswati, and please feel comfortable to speak in Nepali.
Okay.
We have a translator with us. You work as a peer educator in a district in Nepal.
Yes.
You work with youth groups. You're in touch with young adolescent girls in your community. Can you tell us if they're familiar with the issue of birth registration and marriage registration? Are they aware of their rights and what difference this could make in their life? And what do you see as the main challenge for young girls to access these rights?
First of all, thank you, Kiran ma'am, and I'm going to speak in Nepali. विशेष गरी भन्नुपर्दा नेपालमा चाहिँ जन्म दर्ता र विवाह दर्ताहरू कमै मात्रामा गरिन्छ, अरु मृत्यु दर्ताहरू लगायतका कुराहरू पनि कमै मात्रामा गरिन्छ। धेरै मान्छेहरूलाई चाहिँ यस बारेमा जानकारी छैन।
There's no importance given. People don't know and give very little importance to both birth and marriage registration. Very few people know about it.
र यसमा चाहिँ पढे लेखेका नपढे लेखेका सबैजना नै त्यति गर्दैनन्। पढे लेखेकाले पनि गर्नै पर्छ भन्ने उनीहरूलाई त्यति महत्त्व दिएर गरिरहेका छैनन्।
Both educated and non-educated do not value it or feel the importance. Even those who are educated don't see the point of doing it.
तपाईहरुलाई थाहा नै छ, नेपाल बहुभाषा बहुसांस्कृतिक देश भएकोले पनि हाम्रो धेरै यो जन्म दर्ता मृत्यु दर्ता लगायतका कुराहरू चाहिँ नेपाली भाषामा हुने भएकोले उनीहरुलाई आफ्नो भाषाको कारणले पनि यो प्रोसेससम्म पुर्याउनको लागि चाहिँ प्रब्लम छ।
Nepal is multi-linguistic, multi-ethnic group, but the system, all the processes are in Nepali. So for those non-speakers, it is very difficult.
र अर्को कुरा चाहिँ मान्छेहरू आफैले यसलाई झन्झटिलो रूपमा लिन्छन्।
In general, people just find it as a burden.
नेपालमा धेरै विवाहहरू चाहिँ मागी विवाह नै हुने गर्दछ।
Most of the marriages are arranged marriages.
तर अहिले चाहिँ विभिन्न सोशल नेटवर्कहरूले गर्दाखेरि साथसाथै टेलिभिजन च्यानलहरू यताउता हेरेर उनीहरूले चाहिँ छिटो-छिटो विवाह गर्ने चलन पनि छ। साथै परिवारले नै मागेर पनि छिटो विवाह गरिदिने चलन छ।
With recent TV and other media, there is a trend of young people getting married early themselves, but there is a trend also within the family to get them married fast.
जब उसको महिनावारी प्रक्रिया सुरु हुन्छ, उ विवाहका लागि तयार भएको भन्ने चाहिँ परिवारले सोचेर उसको आमाबुवाले चाहिँ छिटो कम उमेरमै विवाह गरिदिने चलन छ।
When she starts to menstruate, parents feel she is ready to get married, so therefore parents get them married early.
र नेपालमा चाहिँ 18 वर्षभन्दा सानै कम उमेरमा विवाह गर्यो भने कानुन लाग्छ भन्ने कुराले गर्दाखेरि पनि विवाह पछि दर्ता गर्न मान्छेहरू गइरहेका हुँदैनन्।
In Nepal, under 18 marriage, under 18 is considered a girl, not an adult. So when they get married, the parents or others don't do marriage registration because they feel they'll be criminalized for it.
र अरु चाहिँ अहिले सुरु भइसकेको छ, महिलालाई चाहिँ आदि अंश दिनुपर्छ आफ्नो श्रीमानको। त्यो कारणले गर्दा पनि हाम्रोमा बहुविवाहका प्रचलनहरू भएकाले मान्छेहरूले चाहिँ आफ्नो प्रपर्टीको भाग दिनुपर्ने भएकोले पनि जन्म दर्ता विवाह दर्ता गर्न जाँदैनन्। विवाह दर्ता गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ जन्म दर्ता मागिने हुन्छ, अनि यदि विवाह दर्ता गरिहाल्यो भने आफ्नो अंश चाहिँ आफ्नो श्रीमतीलाई पनि दिनुपर्छ भन्ने डरले पनि धेरैजना विवाह दर्ता गर्न जाँदैनन्।
There is polygamy, multiple marriages, and also there is no birth registration. So when you go for marriage registration, you're asked for birth registration. So that is one reason why it is not registered. But the other reason is also about when you register a marriage, you also, the woman or girl is entitled to property. So that's another reason why men refuse to register.
जन्मदर्ताकै कुरा गर्नुपर्दा चाहिँ जब उनीहरूको छोराछोरीहरू 7 अथवा 8 कक्षामा पुग्छन् तब स्कुलले जन्मदर्ता आवश्यक छ भन्दाखेरि जन्मदर्ताको प्रक्रियामा आमाबुवा जान खोज्छन् तर कमै मात्राले मात्रै जन्मदर्ता गराउने गरेको छ नेपालमा चाहिँ
There are very few who do birth registration, but the schools ask around 7th or 8th grade, the parents are asked to do birth registrations. So that's when the parents start to, but they go for birth registration, but even then very few do it.
Thank you very much, Saraswati. You've given us a quick insight into the very practical challenges for young girls in your community. There is a very important issue of not having access to information or knowledge about how to do the procedures. There's also a language restriction, which is important and it could be relevant for many countries. You've highlighted some of the risks which are very gender-related and could result in a lot of discrimination for young girls who marry, because there's a strategy that if they don't receive the marriage registration, it reduces their opportunity to their rights to property and inheritance. And also that for children, there is a demand quite late in school by the 7th and 8th standard, because of which parents would need to learn how to do the registration. So you've raised some very practical issues. I'm sure some of our speakers who deal with the issue of birth registration will clarify some of these. But meanwhile, let me move to Ibu Alisa to tell us a little bit about the youth groups you work with in Indonesia, as compared to Nepal, a wider group where you're looking at many of the consequences of child marriage and your dialogue with them, as well as with the young Muslim clergy. What is the position there in terms of attitudes and practices to child marriage?
Thank you, Ibu Kiran. Right now I'm working with Family Welfare Agency of Nahdlatul Ulama. This is the biggest Muslim social organizations in Indonesia. We have 50 million members all over Indonesia, and mostly they live in rural areas. Some of them are of course now working and moving into the cities because of lack of opportunities, economic opportunities in villages, and they mostly become the urban poor community. So I'm working for family welfare issues from Muslim organizations. That's why this topic of child marriage is very close to our work. And we have seen right now in Indonesia is at the gate of what we call the demographic dividend. Because we have a high percentage of young people under the age of 14, and it should be a demographic dividend, but it can also lead to demographic burden if we don't prepare it in an appropriate way. And the challenge for that would be the reproductive health issues, and it is reflected that from the data, from national surveys, from basic health research, that we have a higher number of sexually active adolescents, of course, and also the marriage under the age of 18 for girls. In Indonesia, 1 of 4 girls they marry under the age of 18. This is a big number if you know that Indonesia has 250 million populations. So 1 out of 4, they got married under the age of 18, and I'm sure all of you are aware of the consequences, the health consequences, the vicious circles of poverty for a young girl to become a mother. And the risk, the health risk for the babies itself, as we know in Indonesia right now, the data for the infant mortality rate, for example, has been stagnant. And these are all issues of the child marriage. In Indonesia, the legal age of marriage is 16 for women and 19 for men. And right now in Indonesia, we have a coalition, civil society coalitions that is appealing. This is an ongoing process right now. We are appealing for a judicial review for this legal age of marriage to be raised to 18 for the girls, because we acknowledge that we have so many problems because of the younger age of marriage. Also because we have now maternal mortality rate rose from 228 in 2007 to 359. That's a big problem, because Indonesia is used to be one of the success story of family planning, but we are now seeing a lot of problems with that. And one of the problems would be the transitions from the political system from centralized to decentralized that puts more authority to the local government. But as a consequence, we have problems with the cross-sectoral and synergy of work within the government themselves. So those are the problems, and what we're seeing right now is we're trying to fight back, but that's why we need the civil registrations as tools to help us get the real data on child marriage and also on the dynamics between data, and that would be the vital statistic we need to provide the best policy to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Evelisa. You pointed out a set of factors that we often forget. The intersectionality of data, the fact that we can't just look at the prevalence of child marriage, we also need to look at the demographic dividend. What's the youth population of the country? We need to correlate it with the trends in maternal mortality and infant mortality. We need to understand how legal frameworks in the country influence and shape the opportunities or the possibilities for transforming the stage for this large youth population. And you have rightly pointed out that in some countries like Indonesia, the legal age of marriage for girls is still 16. And the challenge of how do we harmonize this with international guidelines which recognizes that a child is a child under the age of 18. And most countries, in fact, since the ICPD, more than 150 countries have introduced laws which recognize that child marriage is a violation of law if the child is under 18. And so I think you've brought together the challenge of how to have a multi-sectoral response if we want to have any change. It's not good enough just to look at one dimension. How can we do that best is a question I'm sure we will address as the afternoon progresses. Let me move from Indonesia then to Bangladesh. As you all know, Bangladesh is a country which is very much in the limelight because the data indicates that it has a very high prevalence of child marriage, but we also have very good examples of government interventions and of a range of interventions to try and address and reduce child marriage. We are going to hear from Mr. Abdul Bhuyan about how he, as a marriage registrar in Sylhet district, is attempting to address this problem.
আমি ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি আয়োজকদের যে আমাকে এখানে আসার সুযোগ করে দিয়েছেন। সম্মানিত অতিথিবৃন্দ, অডিয়েন্স, আমাদের সরকার
I would like to share thanks and gratitude. I would like to share thanks and gratitude to give me opportunity to come here.
আমি অত্যন্ত দুঃখের সাথে জানাচ্ছি যে যদিও আমাদের দেশে অনেক চাইল্ড ম্যারেজ সম্পর্কে অনেক আইন করা হয়েছে, কিন্তু চাইল্ড ম্যারেজের হার এশিয়ার মধ্যে সর্বোচ্চ।
We have some very good policies and laws, Despite that, prevalence of child marriage is very high in our country. You already heard that one.
এখানে জন্মমৃত্যু ও বাল্যবিবাহ প্রতিরোধের অনেকগুলো আইন রয়েছে।
We have some very good act and laws regarding marriage registration, birth registration, and death registration, and as well as policy to prevent child marriage.
আইন অনুসারে বিবাহ নিবন্ধনের সময় জন্ম নিবন্ধন সনদ দেখানো বাধ্যতামূলক।
As per Muslim Marriage Registration Act, everybody has to show birth certificate during marriage registration.
বাস্তবে উল্লেখযোগ্য সংখ্যক জন্ম নিবন্ধন হচ্ছে, কিন্তু সবার সে জন্ম নিবন্ধন সনদ এখনো নাই।
In reality, a significant number of birth has been registered, but everybody do not have birth certificate.
সরকারের অনেক চেষ্টা সত্ত্বেও এখনো আমরা শতভাগ জন্ম নিবন্ধন অনলাইন করতে পারিনি।
Despite some initiatives from government, we cannot able to achieve 100% online birth registration till now.
মুসলিম ম্যারেজ রেজিস্ট্রার সমিতি সিলেট গত 30 বছর ধরে সিলেট বিভাগে কাজ করছে। বর্তমানে এর সংখ্যা কাজীদের সংখ্যা 136 জন।
Muslim Marriage Register Samiti Association has been working last 30 years. We have working with 136 marriage registrar.
আমাদের এই ম্যারেজ রেজিস্ট্রি করতে যে অনেকগুলো চ্যালেঞ্জের সম্মুখীন হচ্ছি। চ্যালেঞ্জগুলো প্রথম হচ্ছে এখনো শতভাগ অনলাইন রেজিস্ট্রেশন না থাকার কারণে, বার্থ রেজিস্ট্রেশন অনলাইন না থাকায় পাত্র এবং পাত্রীর বয়স প্রমাণ করতে আমরা পারছি না।
During working, we are facing some challenges. First one is we cannot verify the age of bride or bridegroom because there is no online birth registration system.
এখানে প্রভাবশালী মহল বাল্যবিয়ে পড়ানো ও রেজিস্ট্রির জন্য চাপ সৃষ্টি করে থাকেন। অনেক সময় ভুয়া সনদ দেখিয়ে রেজিস্ট্রি করানোর চেষ্টা করেন।
Sometimes local influential people are creating illegal pressure to marriage register to perform child marriage and register that one, showing fake certificate.
ধর্মীয় নেতারাও এই সব রেজিস্ট্রিতে নমনীয় থাকেন বা নমনীয়ভাবে সহায়তাই করে থাকেন।
As our religious country, so Muslim leaders are also supporting child marriage as well.
সংশ্লিষ্ট আইনে বাল্যবিবাহের জন্য শাস্তির বিধান আছে, কিন্তু বিয়েকে অবৈধ বা বাতিল করা হয় নাই।
As per Child Marriage Restraint Act, this is punishable offense if anybody perform that one or associated with that one, but marriage cannot be cancelled.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Boyan. You've highlighted some unique aspects which are relevant for several countries. The fact that there are people who have birth registration, but they don't actually have the certificate, and what a difference that makes when they come for the marriage registration. So a very important point for all of us to consider is that it's not good enough to just register. You actually need the certificate. And we heard from Nepal already that it's very difficult to have the information, the access, often the mobility and the complexity of the rules. So that's an area that obviously needs a lot of attention and discussion. I think another point you raised is that there is a very good policy in Bangladesh where there is a clear directive from the government that every marriage registrar has to check the age of both the boy and the girl, because it is a cognizable offense if the person is under 18, and that's commendable to the government. But the challenge is that there is alternatives available of producing false certificates. And so the question is not whether it's a punitive approach that will work, but what is the way in which we can transform mindsets and make people more responsible not to abuse the system? It's a very good question. It's probably real for many countries. And I also appreciate the fact that you highlighted, as a marriage registrar, how big a role you play in registering marriages every day and managing 136 centers. So we do need to recognize that when we look at birth registration, we also have to take into account the cultural realities of countries where marriage registration is a requirement by culture, and what are the implications of better coordination between these two factors. Lastly, he pointed out that you need online registration. I'm sure that's something you've discussed already, and we will discuss more. How feasible is that? What difference can it make for avoiding any abuse of the system and making it easier for every child to be able to access information at the right time? So after visiting Nepal, Indonesia, and Bangladesh, let's move to India. And we are honored that Dr. Chandramouli is here. And Dr. Chandramouli, can you tell us what's the situation with child marriage and registration in India today? Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. Frankly, I was a bit taken aback on this invitation because as registrars, we have a very sectoral role, and we think, I mean, what have we got to do with, we're not gender activists, we are not in the field of gender, and leave it to the gender guys to, look at it.
That's why we have you here.
I think the other eye-opener here has been what Saraswati and Alisa and Mr. Bhuyan have pointed out. We've been sitting for the last 2 days or even months before that, thinking of data. How will this data help governments plan? How will the data help, from a completely top-down kind of an approach? They have brought us to the realization that what use is this data or a certificate if it is not useful to their day-to-day lives. Saraswati very, very, very succinctly put it, like, what use is it? Why should I go and register? I mean, finally, if I want to marry and your birth registration is going to prevent me from marrying, I don't think I'll want to register. So I think we need to now look at it at a much larger picture. We need to look at it from the angle of bottoms up, what it means to the people. I'm also reminded of Carla's words in the end. How do you make all this sustainable? I don't think governments can sustain it. It has to be the people who will sustain it. It has to be a demand-driven, demand push from the bottom where the people want it because it serves certain purposes. And I think from this particular purpose of child marriage, 3 purposes can be served by birth registration and later on maybe marriage registration. One is prevention, the protection, and also the prosecution of offenders. I think in all these 3 aspects, you need certification or documentation, and that is what the civil registration system would provide. Number 1, will civil registration prevent child marriage? I don't think so. I think case studies which have been circulated outside clearly show that it is not the registration which will prevent, but it would be a proof to protect or prevent. When Mr. Bhuyan talked about, insisting on a certificate of birth before registering the certificate of marriage, I think that is an excellent step. Now, how do we universalize the system of birth registration is what we have been breaking our heads, and we've been talking about this regional action framework. But the point which was brought out by Alisa about, the different customary laws. You don't have often in many countries one single law which governs marriage registration. There are customary laws, there are religious laws which are different from the national laws very often. if you take the case of India, you have a voluntary registration of marriages under the civil law. You have a customary registration of marriages under the Muslim law. And the government is now thinking of a universal mandatory registration of marriages, which is now doing the rounds in the legislature. The issue is, how does the civil registrar or the community of civil registrars, what role are they going to perform in this whole business? Is it their job to go into the social aspects, into the religious aspects? Definitely not. But we do play an extremely important role in providing that basic document, that basic proof, which would help a person determine whether a marriage is taking place below the legal age of marriage. Once you are not able to prevent, it at least protects, in the sense that there are many provisions in the law which allow for the protection of the victim of a child marriage, for maintenance, for support, for legal aid, for financial aid, and all this would depend on the documentation that we as civil registrars provide. And of course, the prosecution for that documentary evidence is extremely important, and that is where our role comes in. I think I'll pick up this thread later, but I think as civil registrars, the community of civil registrars does have a very basic role in providing the documentation that is required to build upon this campaign to end child marriages.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma. I think you helped pull together very succinctly the fact that there are faces and there are lives behind the numbers and the data. And thank you so much for drawing on the examples presented by our speakers from the community and from the districts. But I think you have raised the question of the 3 Ps, the prevention, protection, and prosecution. And you have pointed out very honestly that everyone can't do everything, but that brings us back to the point that we need much better coordination and much better sharing of data so that we can build on each other's contribution to bring results. That's not always easy because very often we only speak to our own people, and as you said, for months, each of us have been engaged either as activists or as data gatherers in highlighting this point. So how can we bring better collaboration so that we have universal systems and that everybody has their birth certificate, or as is written here, everywhere, everyone gets into the picture. Also, the challenge continues about harmonization of the multiple laws that we have in some of our countries. It's a challenge that many countries are struggling with, that the international community, regional community is struggling with. And I'm going to ask Dr. Rinchin, who at the regional level is dealing with member states of SAARC, and who through the CIVAC process, working with member states, has attempted to raise these very sensitive issues on the variations in legal frameworks and also how to bring countries together to discuss these sensitive issues. Dr. Rinchin.
Thank you, Kiran. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the appreciation from me and my organization for the opportunity to participate in this panel discussion. My colleagues in the panel, the previous speakers, have spelled out clearly what the ground reality is, what the challenges are, and also the opportunities that can be, sourced in terms of how to address this whole issue and nightmare of child marriage. One of the biggest challenges I face is trying to bring different groups and organizations, people together on a platform and agree on one common agenda that affects all of us individually. And I think this is the biggest challenge. Each one of us, I'm sure in your respective fields, have this on a day-to-day basis. Now, CIVAC, as Kiran said, is the South Asia Initiative to End Violence Against Children. And when we are talking about ending violence against children, yesterday sitting in the hall when you all were debating about concerned, deeply concerned, I was actually thinking in my mind it should be horrified, traumatized because I think the numbers are just too big to be able to comfort or take any comfort. And the fact that we are dealing in a forum where we have civil registrars who deal with numbers, having to translate those numbers and behind each number putting those human element that you are figuring out is something which we need to bring into this whole dialogue and dimension of civil registrars and the child rights activists collaboration. And this is something I look forward to in the days ahead. But what I want to stress in my first segment, hopefully, is to stress that SIWAC is not just an entity. It is part of a larger global movement to end violence against children. And when you're talking about violence against children, which all of us are, sometimes you hear people talk about it in everyday language, use it in everyday statements. You'll hear it from who is who. As soon as they take the podium, they'll talk about, we want to end violence against children. We have to make sure their children are not subjected to abuse, neglect, discrimination. And they walk out of the door and don't even realize that every statement they make has to have a justification that can be followed through, because at the end of the day, we are accountable and answerable. Now, the global study on violence against children, the South Asian segment, where all the SAARC countries participated, revealed that South Asian children suffer 5 commonest forms of violence: child labor, child marriage, corporal punishment, sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. These are the 5 commonest forms of violence against children. And the study also identified 13 different strategic areas that needs to be brought into play if we are going to effectively address this. And it starts from fostering regional cooperation to right down to generating evidence, doing research, ensuring that every child is caught and brought into the count in terms of both benefits as well as in terms of identifying issues and challenges. So from that angle, we, in our effort to create this movement in South Asia to contribute to the larger global movement to ending violence against children, the only option was to create networks and partnerships which can then bring a larger tsunamic effort or factor that will drive the process. So we have all the 8 governments who have come together to actually create SIWAC. So this SIWAC is an intergovernmental mechanism. However, we managed to get ourselves to agree on creating a platform that is more inclusive by bringing in the governance structure, civil society organizations. So on the SIWAC governing board, with 8 government nominees, we have 2 civil society organizations who play full-fledged board governing board roles. And we have 2 observers who learn the ropes as they participate in the governing board meetings. We have 4 children, out of which 2 stay as full-fledged board members and 2 learn the ropes before they take over as full-fledged members. When we started putting this together, one of the things we found is that the main players are left out most of the time. The UN INGO partners, the development partners, who actually create power dynamics within the networks, be it government, civil society, or any other partners. We needed to rope them in so that they are also party to and they're accountable to the decisions made within the SIWAC process. So the South Asia Action and Coordinating Group was created, which actually has UN INGO partners. And the chair of that has been brought on the SIWAC governing board so that they not only participate, but are also accountable. Right. So from that angle, child marriage, the way we look at it, with all the different dynamics that are in play, we need to create a larger platform whereby different elements, starting from policy, law, legal, prosecution, prevention, to even the data and figures that you all bring into play, needs to be looked at before we can, move on the path of ending child marriage in the days to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rinchen. I think you've reminded us that today we can no longer work alone, and we have to make an extra effort to bring together different organizations at different levels so we can negotiate and find a common ground from where we can move forward. And it's simply not possible for any one group to work alone. We've sort of moved beyond that. And I think for the SAARC region with its huge diversity, the fact that you can bring together children's representations, civil society, researchers, as well as governments in the same room repeatedly with the same status as members of the governing board is a model which can be looked at that can facilitate addressing sensitive issues beyond national borders, and that can have a much stronger regional voice in addressing some of these very sensitive issues. And we will come back to you to look at the regional action plan. But now, before we move to the next lot of questions, we have an example of a success story from Bangladesh with a film. If you could please have the film, which will demonstrate to us how a birth certificate can make a difference in the reality of one girl's life.
আমার নাম হাসি, আমার ছোট বোন খুশি। ও সপ্তম শ্রেণীতে পড়ে। গত পরশু তো ওর বিয়ে হয়ে যায়। কিন্তু জন্ম নিবন্ধন সনদটা থাকায় ওর বিয়াটা বন্ধ করা গেল। খুশির বিয়াটা বন্ধ করা গেলেও আমার বেলা তা হয়নি। আমার ইচ্ছার বিরুদ্ধে 15 বছর বয়সকে 18 বছর বানায়া বিয়াটা হয়ে গেছিল। অল্প বয়সে বিয়া দিয়া আমার জীবনের সব আশা আকাঙ্ক্ষা আনন্দ শেষ হয়ে গেল। লেখাপড়া খেলাধুলার বদলে সংসার নামে এক কঠিন বাস্তবের মুখে পড়া আমি হইলাম দিশাহারা। আমার জীবনে যেই ভুল হয়েছে আমি আমার সন্তানের জীবনে আর সেই ভুল হইতে দিব না। তাই তো এই জন্ম নিবন্ধন। এখন আর কেউ পারবো না 15-রে 18 বানাইতে। শিশু বিবাহ প্রতিরোধে চাই জন্ম নিবন্ধন।
So thank you very much to Plan for this positive example. There are many stories like this where with the next generation, with access, with effort, we have seen changes and the possibility for girls' lives to change simply by that one piece of paper. Let me move on to our second quick round of comments from our panelists, and we'd like them now to give us quick examples of successful interventions as well as the recommendations of how we can move forward in ensuring that we reduce and end child marriage in our region. May I begin with you, Ibu Elisa, this time, for you to give us some specific examples of how you have worked with young people, how you worked with young Muslim clerics in transforming mindsets, in changing approaches, and in bringing synergy with people where it seemed impossible.
Okay. I will speak on the within the framework of Indonesian experience. Indonesia is still a very communal and patriarchal society, so it is very leadership driven. Whoever takes the leadership will influence the way the society responds to the policy. Like, for example, the government of Indonesia is right now working very hard on the issue of populations in a very serious manner. They employed many strategies, but besides that, the role of the religious leaders, especially the Muslim religious leaders in Indonesia, are very crucial. Reflecting on the success of family planning in the 90s in Indonesia, the role of Muslim religious leaders are very important at that time, because in 1967, one of the biggest Muslim organization in Indonesia, Muhammadiyah, had issued a fatwa on contraceptives, and then Nahdlatul Ulama in 1971, and that those two fatwas have been equipping the government in ensuring that the family planning program is in place, and we saw the success of that. And so that's why we have to bring back the role of the religious leaders. The Muslim religious leaders can play the role, be involved in public educations, especially about the reproductive health, that resulted in maturing age of marriage. Like, for example, within Nahdlatul Ulama, we have 40,000 schools all over Indonesia, serving especially the rural areas. Capitalizing on these 40,000 schools, helping them to get the message across, to help them understand the benefits of delaying marriage can lead to a bigger success for the whole community. And the Muslim religious leaders can also promote values in society that respects girls as equal to boys. Because in Indonesia, the ratio between girls and boys for marriage under the age of 18 is 7.5 to 1. 7 girls married under the age of 18 to 1 boy married under the age of 18. So this role of Muslim religious leaders to promote values in society that respects girls as equal to boys would be very important. And also the last one, because Indonesia is also a political society, the Muslim religious leaders can advocate for the regulations to ensure that this approach and these paradigms can be employed in regulations. For that, of course, we need the Muslim religious leaders that work with social fiqh paradigms that ensure the basic rights of the Muslims. So in respect to the registrations, data from registrations, birth certificates, and marriage registrations would be needed to help to get higher awareness and understanding for the Muslim religious leaders and faith-based organizations. Because in Indonesia, the faith-based organization, they have fatwa bodies, and the fatwas work on principles like Darul Mafasid Muqaddamun alal Jabil Masoli, that is to avoid destructions is put forward before attaining a betterment of society. So if the Muslim religious leaders can understand the problems resulted from child marriage, then they can produce the fatwas, and also they can help advocating the government under the principles of tasarruful imam al ra'iyah manutun bil maslahah. That is this is the policy or the decisions that the leader should make is for the betterment of the people. That's the role of the the registrations.
Thank you so much, Ibu Lisa. I think you've reminded us that we often forget to have a continuous dialogue with religious leaders, and we forget what an enormous power of influence they hold with communities, both younger people and older people, and the access they have from the structures that exist at the community level and even higher levels. And I know at UNFPA, and I'm sure it's the same for UNICEF and other agencies, from the community to the global level, we have brought together interfaith groups so they can dialogue on an issue such as child marriage or violence against women. And it has made a huge difference in them learning facts that they were not aware of. For instance, as you said, Muslim clerics need to have an enormous knowledge about their role, but they may not be as aware of what a difference a birth certificate makes, or why it can ruin the life of a girl if she's married before the age of 18. So I think what you've helped us understand is the importance of having strategies of providing information in a constructive, timely way, both ways, and facilitating processes where this dialogue can be kept dynamic and alive and constructive. So thank you so much for that excellent suggestion. Let me ask Mr. Bhuyan that as a registrar, what do you recommend, Mr. Bhuyan, for us to improve birth registration at the district level?
Thank you very much.
Please bear with us for the translation. Thank you for your patience.
কাজী সমিতি সিলেট প্রায় 30 বছর থেকে ম্যারেজ রেজিস্ট্রেশন নিয়ে কাজ করে আসতেছে। তো আমরা শতভাগ জন্ম নিবন্ধন নিশ্চিত করা এবং সাথে সাথে এর সার্টিফিকেট প্রদান করা এটা চাচ্ছি।
Sylhet Muslim Marriage Register Association is working 30 years. We are demanding for 100% birth registration and certificate given.
জন্ম নিবন্ধন এবং বিবাহ নিবন্ধন অনলাইন করা খুবই জরুরি।
We have to ensure online birth registration and marriage registration as well.
সাথে সাথে ধর্মীয় নেতা, স্থানীয় নেতৃবৃন্দ এবং কাজীদেরকে আইন ও বিধিবিধান সম্পর্কে সচেতন করা।
Give proper orientation to religious leader, marriage register, and local influential person, those who are involved with this sector.
এসব আইনের যথাযথ প্রয়োগ নিশ্চিত করা।
And finally, proper implementation of laws and act.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for those excellent practical suggestions. We hope that as you work on your recommendations, those of you who are involved with dealing with data will identify some of these important recommendations. We need 100% birth and marriage registration online. I think Bangladesh is ahead of many countries in facilitating that. If that's available in Sylhet district, I think what we're hearing is he can play a much better role in monitoring and stopping child marriage from happening. So, and I think the other very good suggestion you gave is to provide information just like Ibu Elisa did, simple to understand information to marriage registrars on this complex reality of data, which is so far away from their frame of reference. How it's a challenge to those of you who manage registration systems. How can you unpack it, make it simple for the ordinary people to understand and use in their daily work? I think that's the message and the challenge for you. Let me move to Dr. Chandramouli for your set of recommendations on addressing some of the key challenges.
I'd speak mostly from our experience in India. Now, firstly, the responsibility of registration has been on the registrars or the parents, but with more and more institutional deliveries taking place and states and districts claiming that 100% institutional delivery is taking place, I thought we would put the onus on the institutions. Very little was done to really bring institutions to book for registration of events that take place within the institutions. So the first thing we've done is to create a database of all institutions where birth and death events are taking place, and linking it to the nearest or the registrar having jurisdiction of that area. This database is backed up, the plans are to back it up with a call center and to use internet effectively and the SMS system. The system that we are putting in place is to, as soon as a birth takes place or a death event takes place, the institution sends an SMS to the central database. And this is followed through with the registrar to ensure that the registration certificate is actually issued. So this linkage between the event, the institution, and the beneficiary has been made possible by a common registration software, a software which would also monitor the institutional events that are taking place, and a feedback mechanism to keep the district registrars, the chief registrar at various levels informed about the position as prevailing in the various levels of the registration hierarchy. The second attempt that we are doing is to build capacity among the registrars. Very often it is, we keep talking about, do registration, 100% is your goal, but we have not talked about the soft aspects of training the registrars, of making them aware of their duties and functions, of providing them the capacity to, for example, if we are talking of cause of death, have we really trained the physicians to do an ICD-10 classification? So capacity building of the registrars as well as the medical doctors is top on our priority. Data digitization. Mention was made about data being available to the marriage registrars to find out. I mean, it's not often that you can get a certificate from the person, but if you could look up the data online. So there is an attempt towards creating these infrastructure. But there we are treading on issues like confidentiality and privacy, which really have to be given serious thought. We're also on an advocacy and publicity campaign where we hope to build up the kind of demand that I talked about. Because unless people start adding a value to the certificate, adding a value to registration, I don't think we're going to succeed in our attempts to reach 100%. And part of this advocacy efforts is to link any governmental benefit or any governmental program to the production of such certificates. If it is an insurance that the government pays out, then the death certificate becomes an important aspect. If it is right from cradle to the grave, you have so many intersection points with the government. And wherever a government intersection comes in, we are trying to link the sectoral programs, whether it is health, whether it is insurance, whether it is labor. We are trying to link the respective governments to come out with the insistence on a birth registration before you extend that benefit. And lastly, we are in the process, the previous panel talked about a national population register. Well, we have also attempted to create a population register. We have a register, an electronic register of more than 1 billion people. And to that, we are adding biometrics, and unique identification is being done based on biometrics. And the basic requirement for entering the National Population Register would be through the birth registration route. And that, we hope, in future would be a push towards more universal birth registration. With all these efforts, we hope that in the next 5 years, we would reach this target that we have set ourselves of 100% birth registration, at the same time 100% registration of deaths that take place in institutions. Of course, there are other initiatives to improve the cause of death reporting, but I won't really go into that at this stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Chandamali. I think it's a very exciting technological leap forward that you've described. And I appreciate especially your highlighting the fact that the accountability has to go beyond individuals to institutions. And the fact that to achieve that, we would have to have a different strategy of how to sensitize institutions. It needs much more investment, and it needs a process versus individual events. You also highlighted the issue of building capacity of staff and advocacy. And for both those, given the discussion this afternoon, we have to have a much more broad-based, holistic approach, bringing together the face of realities on the ground, not just the numbers, and how to have the registrars benefit from some of the priority gender and rights concerns which exist in that country, because that will shape and influence the effectiveness of the intervention. So I think there's a requirement, as you've said, to benefit from parallel processes that are ongoing in India and in other countries, of the civil society, of even the government, on how to ensure that gender is mainstreamed and the rights, understanding of rights is mainstreamed into broader mechanisms such as the registration system. So how can we provide those? It's a great opportunity through capacity building to introduce and revise and broaden some of the interventions we make for this capacity building. I hope you all are still with us. Can you bear with us for another 10-15 minutes? We're about to close and open the floor for discussion after our last two speakers. Thank you so much for your patience and being with us through this afternoon. Let me move to Dr. Rinchan quickly, and then to Saraswati.
Now, child marriage is just not an issue of children getting married or girls getting married before 18. There is a whole lot of spectrum leading towards or emanating out of a child marriage, whether it is sexual abuse, exploitation, whether it is related to missing children and cross-border trafficking, the whole nightmare of now child brides, which have, to a large extent been fueled by trafficking of young girls. Then there is whole issue related to what do we do with children who are already in marriage, below 18? What do we do with their rights and protection, with their livelihoods? How do we address that? The whole issue of, reproductive and sexual health, and then, the whole issue of this uncomfortable, justification which keeps on coming from families or from communities that we have to get our girls married early because that provides security, economic security for the families, or it is actually a means of protecting children. Like, for example, in this world where we live in a lot of, conflict and turmoil, you see now in the Middle East with this, there are a lot of stories now coming out where girls in the refugee camps are now being married off, not so much because parents do not understand or the implications of child marriage, but because they want to protect their girls. So these are issues that we need to bring into the whole dialogue. Now, the other aspect which we need to also address is this whole complication, yet the necessary strategy to bring everybody to come together from different walks of life, from different organizations, with people and organizations with different mandates, to discuss and create a common convergent strategy to address the issue of child marriage. So what SIWAC is doing is, with the governments, we have now brought the civil society, UN NGO Partners Network together. We have now got children, young people in all the 8 countries organized into national child participation forums, and we have regional child participation forum with their leadership at the SIWAC governing board now addressing issues related to violence against children. And then one of the things which we are trying to do now is work with the judiciary and the legal fraternity of South Asia, the SARC law, which is the other apex body of SARC, by trying to convince them that it's time for the judiciary and the dispensers of justice to look at what is happening around them beyond just interpreting the cold letters of the law and put some human element into their interpretations. We are appealing, in fact advocating with the parliamentarians, to stop now, approving or clearing so many acts. Go back and look at what has happened to all the acts that has passed. Acts should not be created just because it's a political, commitment. It has to be based on what is the need and what is the challenge on the ground. So that's another area that we are working on. But more importantly, from SIWAC, we have been, in the last 2 years, working on bringing together a comprehensive regional action plan to end child marriage. And from 2012 December till just 1 week back, actually the first week of November, we actually now have a regional action plan which has been endorsed by both the governments, the civil society, and all other partners. And that regional action plan with 7 outcomes, which addresses all these different dimensions, we actually brought a Kathmandu call for action, which actually brings accountability mechanisms. And I had about 60 plus organizations who were given 5 minutes space to say what they're going to do for.
Dr. Rinchin, your 5 minutes are over.
Yeah, okay. So basically, this is the Kathmandu call for action, which found its way to the Beijing review last week in many of the ministerial statements. And this is what we hope will make sense as we move along.
Thank you so much.
Sorry to take extra time.
Not at all. This Kathmandu call for action, we have copies outside, and I would strongly recommend you take a copy and read it. We were part of this process, and it's a really comprehensive, holistic approach which addresses many of the issues we've raised today and really is a possibility of taking forward a response to child marriage by all stakeholders. Before we move to the conclusion and the discussion, may I request our youngest participant to give us her view of what should be done next. Please, Saraswati.
Thank you, ma'am. जहाँसम्म लाग्छ नेपालमा जन्मदर्ता र बाल विवाह धेरै मात्रामा छ.
As far as I know, In Nepal, there's a lot of child marriage and there's no birth registration.
र विशेष गरी बर्थ रजिस्ट्रेसन भइहाल्यो भने पनि मैले चाहिँ मेरो आफ्नै नगरपालिकामा जब युएनएफपिएले मलाई यहाँ आउन इन्भिटेसन दिएको थियो त्यतिखेर एउटा सूचना माग गरेको थिए जन्म दर्ताको बारेमा.
When I was invited by UNFPA to participate in this program, I had gone to the municipality, in my municipality, to do a research.
र मैले चाहिँ त्यहाँ एउटा पाएँ हैन एउटा डाटा दिएको थियो त्यसमा चाहिँ महिलाको चाहिँ पुरुषको भन्दा कम पाइयो दर्ता गरेको जन्म दर्ता गरेको महिलाको चाहिँ 161 161 र पुरुषको चाहिँ 207 मात्र मैले डाटा पाएँ त्यसको.
The figures I got for women is 161 who was registered and 207 for male. So there is a difference between the birth registration of male and female.
त्यही भएर पनि मलाई जन्म दर्ता चाहिँ विशेष गरी महिलाको लागि र एउटा केटीको लागि चाहिँ आवश्यकता छ जस्तो लाग्छ.
I think birth registration for girls or female is very, very important.
किनभने उसँग जन्म दर्ता भएन भने उसले नागरिकता पाउन सक्दैन र नागरिकता नपाउँदाखेरि उसले एउटा देशको नागरिक हुनबाट छुट्छ भने देशको जनसङ्ख्या जुन सम्पूर्ण देशहरुमा चाहिँ नेपालमा यति जनसङ्ख्या छ भनिरहँदा उसले आफैलाई त्यो जनसङ्ख्यामा नपाउने समस्या पनि हुन्छ.
If a girl is not registered, then she cannot have a citizenship and she cannot be counted as the citizen of the country.
र अर्को कुरा म सानो घटना पनि धेरै समय लिन चाहन्छु अलिकति धेरै समय मसँग चाहिँ म आफै पनि एउटा रेडियो कार्यक्रम पनि प्रोडक्सन गर्ने भएकोले मैले केही आवाजहरू लिएको थिएँ बाल विवाह गरेका साथीहरुसँग.
I produce radio programs and I have taken an interview which I would like to share.
उहाँले चाहिँ प्रेम विवाह गर्नुभएछ कक्षा 7 मा हुँदा नै.
This young girl had love marriage when she was in 7th grade.
त्यसपछि चाहिँ उहाँको बुबा आर्मी भएकोले उहाँहरु दुईजना भागेर विवाह गर्दाखेरि थाहा पाएर रोक छुटाइदिनु भएछ.
The father who is in the army found out about it and stopped them from running away.
र रिसको झोकमा चाहिँ छोरीलाई घरबाटै निकालेकोले अहिले चाहिँ उ अरु मान्छेको घरमा बसेर काम गर्दै पढ्दै छिन्.
He was so angry that he threw the daughter out of the house and now she is working and studying in somebody else's house.
अब हेर्नुस् उहाँसँग न जन्मदाता छ न नागरिकता नै अब कसले बनाइदिने उहाँको नागरिकता.
Now look at this, she would neither get her birth registration nor her citizenship. Who is going to make her birth registration or citizenship?
र म एउटा युवा सूचना केन्द्र युथ इन्फर्मेसन सेन्टरमा काम गर्छु साथै नगरपालिकाको एउटा स्वयंसेवकको रूपमा पनि काम गर्ने भएकोले हामीले चाहिँ नगरपालिकामा भएका विभिन्न कम्युनिटी अवेरनेस सेन्टरहरू त्यहाँ गएर पनि यसको बारेमा जन्म दर्ता नागरिकताको बारेमा कुरा गरिरहेका छौं.
I work as a volunteer in the municipality and also as in the youth information center. So when I go back, I'm going to share. I'm going to share about it.
र म केही तीनवटा कुराहरु चाहिँ यहाँ रेकमेन्ड गर्न चाहन्छु विशेष गरी यो CRVS को बारेमा चाहिँ विशेष गरी सरकारी तहमा चाहिँ यस्तो आवश्यकताको बारेमा बुझाउन जनसमुदायसम्म यसको जानकारी सूचनाहरू चाहिँ पुग्न जरुरी छ. यी प्रक्रियालाई सजिलो बनाउन कागजी रूपमा मात्र नभएर कम्प्युटराइज सिस्टममा लानुपर्छ.
The government officials need to inform about the importance about the CRVS through informative programs. To make and also to make this process user friendly through computerized system.
अर्को चाहिँ परिवारका सबै सदस्यहरू विशेष गरी आमा र बुवाले चाहिँ आफ्नो बच्चा जन्मिने बित्तिकै बर्थ रजिस्ट्रेसन गर्न लानुपर्छ भन्ने कुरालाई पनि मूल प्रभावीकरणमा चाहिँ बुझाउन जरुरी छ जस्तो लाग्छ.
Also the parents family especially parents need to understand it's their not only their rights but also responsibility to immediately register birth registration of their children.
र अर्को कुरा चाहिँ CRVS को बारेमा मान्छेलाई जानकारी हुँदा हुँदै पनि गराइरहेका छैनन्. त्यसैले विभिन्न मिडियाहरू टेलिभिजनहरूबाट चाहिँ यो कुराहरूलाई सूचना जानकारीमूलक तरिकाले दिएर चाहिँ एजुकेट गराउन जरुरी छ.
So a lot of people even though they know they are not doing it, so it should be the awareness should be through media.
And at last I am a girl at age 24. I have a passport and I'm here in Thailand, but till now I do not have the birth certificate. So when I will be back in Nepal, I'm going to get my birth certificate. And I also liked the girl from Nepal do not like me. And also I'm going to add in my radio programs and community awareness centers to do the birth certificate to make the citizenship. And also when I will get married, and then I will also register my marriage. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So this is a good example of instant transformation. I think coming here, Saraswati's learned a lot and is going back with a very clear agenda of change, an individual plan, which she will introduce in all the areas of her work, including transforming her own life and recognizing that at 24, she does not have a birth certificate, but recognizing that it's still useful for her to get one. So with that, let me stop. Thank you for your patience again. I now open the floor for questions, comments, to our speakers, anything that you would like to clarify or add. The floor is open. I think everyone's exhausted, so there's not a there's a hand up. Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Actually, I want to thank the distinguished panelists for a very useful conversation. It's just that now I realize that actually we might be doing something wrong, and I want your thoughts on it. The gentleman from protection, what is it? Abuse against children. Yeah, he mentioned something very important, which is marriage. We want to save the children from early marriage, and at the same time, we consider marriage as a protection. So, is marriage a protection, or do we want to save them from that? At the same time, Mr. Chandramouli from India yesterday said that registering an event does not necessarily legalize it. So I was just thinking, if we do register these marriages for the sake of the protection of the child who's getting married, would it be wise to do that? At the same time, we're not legalizing it, but it's some form of protection so that we have some registration somewhere of the event. So I just wanted your thoughts about that.
Thank you so much. Let's take a few questions, then I'll request our speakers to respond. Yes, and then I'll come to Cambodia.
Thank you. Actually, I want to make some comment on the representative of NGO presented the picture of Nepal, and also I want to draw the attention of House. I am very much convinced with the NGO that related to the awareness barrier. Yes, there is awareness barrier. People are not much aware of registering, but this does not mean that the picture they have shown is not exaggerated. Yes, I want to say clearly. And regarding the child marriage, we are very much convinced, and we are very much committed that it's against the human right and against the Nepalese civil code. But still, from the point of view of civil registrars and from the point of view of birth, death, and other vital event registration act, refusing to register the child marriages is also a crime. So here, I think there are some confusion with the NGO that presented that the local registrars demand birth certificates as compulsory, but it's not compulsory. According to Nepalese law, marriage registration does not require birth certificate, but the local registrar may demand evidence of date of birth or age, which can be produced by two different certificates. One may be the birth certificate, another can be the citizenship certificate.
Okay.
So, no, there are some more things. Because, and then related to data, yes, I think because we are just reviewing the latest data released from the population census, there the child marriages counts the child marriages of my grandmother as well. So we have not disaggregated data of last 10 years, child marriages in last 10 years, so like that. So that's why we are preparing, we are initiating a survey of vital registration, which can be the baseline for 2015. And last, my final point is that we are generating like awareness through 38,000 different ward citizen forum, which comprises 25 to 35 members in each, and where our NGO fellow, she also accepted that she went there to create the awareness. So this is one thing. And I want to draw the attention that presenting negative and exaggerated picture can be a good source of attracting international cooperation to NGOs, but only at the cost of the renewing the national image. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delegate from Nepal and Cambodia.
Thank you, Chair. My question may be to Indonesia. You have mentioned that the proportion of girl marriage and the boy marriage are very different. It's 7 times different, and the girl marriage, proportion of girl marriage are 7 times more than boys marriage. And I think it should be the same proportion. Why it is very different? Thank you.
There was a question, a hand up at the back. Yes, please.
I'm from UNICEF India. I have a question for Indonesia. I just need a bit of a clarity and understanding. Madam, you mentioned that maternal mortality rate has increased. You gave some numbers, but I'm not able to understand that in this part of the world, we always looked at Indonesia for the better implementation of family planning program. So what is the reason? Is it that adolescent pregnancy has increased? Because adolescent pregnancy has a direct link with maternal mortality. Why you think that maternal mortality in Indonesia is increasing? Because that will be quite a bit of an experience for all of us in this part of the world. Thank you.
Right, I think we have, thank you so much. Let me request our panelists to respond to these 4 questions. Who would like to go first? Dr. Rinchen, would you like to start? And then
yeah, maybe I'll start, because I think the question, the way it is posed, it looked to me as if it was misunderstood. What I'm saying is that the justification given by communities where child marriages happen, particularly in conflict zones, is that it is being done to protect their children, or because the younger the children are married, the less amount of dowry they have to pay, therefore it becomes an economic security. And these are the challenges we have to deal with when we are addressing child marriage. So it was mentioned as part of many other challenges that we need to consider when we are addressing child marriage. Okay. Not condoning it.
May I also answer the same question?
Yes, please.
The point which I made yesterday was in the context of citizenship and whether the birth certificate can be taken directly as a proof of citizenship. And that is where I said the role of the birth registrar was to register the event, the place of the event, the time of the event, and to whom that child was born. And they couldn't go into citizenship issues at the time of issue of the birth certificate. And it is only up to the authorities who are determining the citizenship to look into various other factors before granting citizenship, but birth registration certificate would be an important document towards determining one's citizenship. I hope I have clarified.
Thank you. Ibu-Lisa, would you like to respond to the clarification?
Okay, thank you. Why 1 to 7? Well, because the legal age for marriage for boys are 19. So the boys, the legal age to marriage is 19 for boys and 16 for girls. That's why a lot of girls get married, because it's already legally permissible for them to get married. That's why we are right now campaigning for a judicial review. If we believe that boys reach the maturity of 19 to get married, why the woman has to, to have a lower one? This is a contradictory to the reasoning that says women are the nurturers of children, blah, 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 blah. Actually, the legal age of 16 is detrimental to the life of the family. That's why it becomes 1 to 7, because the legal age is different. That's the reason for 1 to 7. And the maternal mortality rate, why rise? That was also the question for the whole people of Indonesia, because what happened in Indonesia? But this is the importance of data, actually. Yeah, we have data that shows that the sexual activity started earlier because of the reproductive biological aspect is getting earlier, and then also because, like I mentioned before, the shift from centralized to decentralized political system leads to the authority of the local government to deal with these issues, and I don't think that populations has become a central issue for the local governments in Indonesia. So that's why what used to be provided for the people, especially at the rural areas, were not there anymore. Yeah, like for example, the unmet needs for the contraceptives, or the presence of the what we call the family planning advisors at the local community levels. They're not there, and the way the Muslim religious leaders and other religious leaders were involved is also declined between 2004 to 2011. That's why the MMR gets so.
Thank you so much for that explanation, Ibu-Lisa. Now could we have a response to the points raised from Nepal?
सरले जुन कुरा गर्नुभएको थियो विवाह दर्ता गर्ने बेलामा चाहिँ जन्म दर्ता आवश्यक छैन नेपालमा भनेर, जब महिलाले एउटा बच्चा जन्माएर उसको बच्चाको जन्म दर्ता गर्न जान्छिन् तब उसलाई नागरिकताको कुरा आउँछ। तिम्रो नागरिकता बनाऊ अनि बच्चाको जन्म दर्ता गरिन्छ भन्ने कुरा आउँछ। त्यो सन्दर्भमा चाहिँ मैले भन्न खोजेको, यदि जन्म दर्ता पहिल्यै बनाइदिएको भए सायद विवाह गर्न जाँदाखेरि अथवा एउटा बच्चाको जन्म दर्ता रजिस्टर गर्न जाने बेलामा उसले आफ्नो नागरिकताको लागि कसको सुन्नु पर्दैन थियो कि?
When they are married and have children, when they go to get the birth registration of the children, they ask for your own citizenship. And also
marriage certificate.
So also when they have their marriage certificate, I'm talking in that context.
Yes, I have something to say. र अर्को कुरा चाहिँ तपाईले अघि भन्नुभयो क्रिमिनल हो सानो उमेरमा विवाह गरेर दर्ता गरेन त्यो दर्ता नगराउनु पनि क्रिमिनल कुरा हो भन्नुहुन्छ तर धेरै गाविस सचिवहरूलाई मैले यो रिसर्चमा आउने बेलामा भेटेको थिएँ उहाँहरू आफैले स्वीकार्नु भएको छ हामीले सानो उमेरको मान्छेलाई ठुलो उमेर बनाएर रजिस्टर गर्ने गरेका छौं हो यो भाइलेन्स त हो तर के मान्छे खुलेर आउँछन् मैले 16 वर्षमा बिहे गरेर भनेर कसैले रजिस्टर गरेका छैनन् मैले मेरो कम्युनिटीमा पाएको कुरा प्रेजेन्ट गरे धेरै बोलेको थिए भने I'm sorry.
When they are underage and married, when they come to register in the village, they have increased the marriage age to give the certificate.
Thank you very much. I would request Nepal, I'm sure, if there are further clarifications, to please deal with it after the session. And I would now like to, if there are no other hands and questions, we're running late. I've just been informed the interpreters will stop at 5. It's been a long afternoon. But before we close, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Daniel Toole, who is the Regional Director for the UNICEF Eastern Asia Pacific Office, to kindly give us some closing remarks. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, distinguished panels, Kiran, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to just give a round of applause to the panelists for a fascinating conversation. Let me also thank all of you for participating in this event, and just to highlight some of the points that our panelists have highlighted for us. They've reminded us all of the harmful repercussions of child marriage, both on individuals and on society as a whole. And I think they've reminded us mostly about girls, but I'd remind us that boys and girls can both be subject to child marriage. As noted by my colleague Nobuko Horibe and the panelists, girls who marry before 18 are less likely to remain in school and more likely to experience domestic violence. From a health perspective, we understood that young teenage girls are more likely to die due to complications in pregnancy and childbirth than women who marry in their 20s. And their infants are more likely to be stillborn or die in the first month of life. Although, as we heard, many laws across the Asia-Pacific region prevent child marriage before the age of 18, children who have not had their births registered and who do not have a birth certificate often cannot prove that they are too young to marry and therefore are at increased risk of child marriage, as we heard very clearly. We've also learned what we can do to stop this practice. We know that an effective CRVS system registers all births and deaths and other major life events such as marriage, adoption, and divorce. Requiring a birth certificate, as we heard, to marry is one way to help enforce laws prohibiting child marriage and ensuring that all marriages conducted in a state can be registered, as we heard being debated in India, is another way to prevent this violation of child rights. But we must also make a system that's very practical, and we heard that from our panelists. We need to make something that we can implement. This November, the committees for the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC, released a joint general recommendation and general comment. It reiterated that the best interests of the child and the protection of the rights of girls and women should always be taken into consideration. These committees recommend that state parties to the convention adopt or amend legislation with a view to addressing and eliminating harmful practices. It was recommended that a legal requirement of marriage registration, as well as a system of accessible and free birth registration of all children, regardless of their parents' marital status, be established in order to effectively prevent harmful practices, including child marriages. Distinguished delegates, I'm pleased that we are making progress. This week we will make history. It's the first time that governments across all of the Asia-Pacific region will come together at this level to make a declaration to improve civil registration and vital statistics systems. This enhanced government commitment to CRVS will help ensure that children's rights are enforced and that both the individual and society can be spared the harms of child marriage. When all children are registered at birth, we can track them to ensure they are educated and that their rights to survive, thrive, and be protected are realized, including protection against early marriage. And when we prevent early marriage, we promote children's basic rights to contribute to reducing child and maternal death. Ladies and gentlemen, all countries here, all people here want their children to survive. All countries and all people of the Asia-Pacific region can thus contribute to these goals by preventing child marriage. Finally, as the last speaker of the day with 2 minutes, I would like to, on behalf of all of us here present, to thank the translators for their tremendous work during the course of the day. Our collaboration, our discussions require conversations, which thus require translations. So our thanks to you. We could not work without you. Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for the excellent panelists, for the great ideas you've given us, and for the very practical basis that we can take forward. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, and just a quick note from the Secretariat, and we wish you a very pleasant evening, and we look forward to welcoming you back to the Conference Centre to resume deliberations at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you.